Dear friends, colleagues, welcome to this event. We are facing much more complex environment now. If we compare with Kyoto world, we have new issues, net mitigation, sustainable development, and we need to integrate all these elements when hopefully implementing Article 6. Nordic countries were forerunners implementing Kyoto Protocol mechanisms, JI, CDM, early movers, Finland, Sweden, Nefco, Norway is supporting currently continuation of the market. So I believe we have a lot to offer.
Nefco engaged climate focus to consider opportunities and possible structures for implementing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement in the Peruvian solid waste sector. Only those emission reductions going beyond those targets in the NDC, that could be both the unconditional and conditional, so this is up for negotiations between the country. Only those would actually be credited and be converted into ITMOs and be allowed to be transferred internationally to the buying country. The other possibility is simply to try to differentiate or distinguish mitigation impacts per technological components. Operation of landfills, along with flaring and combustion of landfill gas, for instance, could be used to generate emission reductions that are then financed domestically but also internationally through climate finance and be retained by Peru for achieving its unconditional and conditional target. The other technological component would potentially be the use of the biogas to produce energy, and that technological component of the landfill gas to energy could potentially be financed by carbon market.
I think, Tiago, you raised a number of very important and very practical issues in your study, and I think some of these issues around the contractual arrangements, how these transactions will be structured, the practical aspects of transfers and avoiding double claiming, double counting and so forth. I think those are very important issues that need to be addressed in the pilot.
That the global carbon market can enable double the emission reductions at the same cost as the current policies. And this is the reason why we think Article 6 is really important. So it's about ambition raising. It's about to be able to do more and to overachieve countries' NDC. It cannot be emphasized enough the importance of private firms to participate in the Article 6. And I think to create that environment for firms to be able to participate, we need clarity in the rules and also credibility to the system so that there's trust on how it's going to work.
Historically, the Nordic countries have had a unified approach to carbon markets. Many of you who have followed the CDM negotiations over time are aware of the strong cooperation that the Nordic regions have had on CDM. And the Nordic governments want to continue that cooperation under Article 6. Working with the Swedish Energy Agency, we are developing one of the virtual pilots that Sandra mentioned. That work has just kicked off, and we're focusing on renewable energy in Latin America. And the goal of this work really is to identify the nuts and bolts of how you would do an Article 6 activity. We need to strengthen the cooperation between Nordic countries and potential host countries that could generate these emissions reductions that could result in ITMOs over time. I think it's important to do this piloting now. I believe, and I think most companies believe, that emissions reductions projects that generate environmental certificates should also be associated with the Sustainable Development Goals. It's my firm belief that a project that would generate some form of an environmental certificate should solely focus on an emissions reductions attribute, but the project should also generate a substantial amount of sustainable development co-benefits. Under Article 6, we have a new opportunity to include metrics and indicators for measuring the Sustainable Development Goals for projects and activities that generate emissions reductions under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement.
We see the NDCs and the Paris Agreement as an opportunity to align efforts towards sustainable development. In Article 6, to raise our ambition beyond what we have now in our NDCs, We have our, as a flag case, the waste sector, because it's very important for us and it's under the Ministry of Environment, but also for other sectors such as energy, transportation, and so on. We, as Ministry of Environment, want to figure out how we can boost the participation of the private sector, and we see Article 6 as an opportunity to do that, to see results in sustainable development. Just to put a solid waste management as an example, we can see the impacts in job generation, in health improvement, in gender participation. So we see Article 6 as a big opportunity.
Nigeria launched a sovereign green bond with about $300 million. It was launched at the end of 2017, and then we're about to launch the second phase now to support our NDCs. When it starts, Nigeria will be ready for it, and then we will not miss out the way we missed out in the CDM.
What's really important, I think, is to understand that basically the Paris Agreement is a reporting agreement. This is how we report on our nationally determined contributions and how we're fulfilling those. And we are required to account for our NDCs, and we're required to report. So we actually need to tell the world what we're doing and what that looks like in terms of the collective goal. And Article 6 is part of it, so we actually have to account for the use of Article 6 and the transactions that happen there. This is hugely technical, but basically what we're trying to achieve is that Article 6 would rather strengthen the NDCs than kind of provide a loophole for underachieving. Why Article 6 piloting and why right now? This is the perfect time to do Article 6 piloting because, as you say, the negotiations are at a very critical stage. This is a time when we're trying to actually create a functioning operative rulebook for Article 6 activities, and this is exactly the time when we need feedback from piloting activities to be able to formulate a rulebook that actually is helpful and operates in practice. Also, I would say that the world where we're functioning right now, the Paris Agreement world, is completely different to the Kyoto world, mainly because everybody now has mitigation obligations and commitments. So you kind of want that interaction between host countries and possible buyers to be very, very tight. What you can see right now is that the host country participation becomes so much more crucial than it actually did under the CDM. So this is a time to create that iterative conversation.
I'm sure we can thank them in the time-honoured way. Thank you very much.